Hi, everybody. I'm Stesha Brandon, the Literature and Humanities Program Manager at the Seattle Public Library. And as we begin this evening, I would like to acknowledge that we are on Indigenous land. Here in Seattle, these are the traditional unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Duwamish people. We honor their elders, past and present, and thank them for their stewardship of this land. Welcome to the final program in our 2021 Seattle Reads season, an artist talk with Lisa Myers Bulmash. So, reading a book as a community brings people together in powerful and sometimes unexpected ways. And these shared experiences have proven so valuable that hundreds of the one book community reading programs have spread all over the world. And we're proud that the project originated at Seattle Public Library back in 1998, which makes this the 23rd year of this program. And Seattle Reads is one of the many reasons that Seattle was designated a UNESCO City of Literature back in 2017. I wanted to take a minute to thank this year's Seattle Reads sponsors. We're grateful to the Wallace Foundation, Riverhead Books, and the Seattle Times for their generous support for library programs. We're also particularly grateful to this year's community partners, the African American Writers Alliance, Langston, Northwest African American Museum, Wanawari, and Elliott Bay Book Company. And finally, a special thanks to the Seattle Public Library Foundation and thousands of people in our community who make gifts to benefit our library. This private support makes Seattle Reads possible, in addition to hundreds of other free library programs and services every year. I have a couple quick announcements before we get started. We have closed captioning available for this evening's program, and to access the captioning, you just click on the icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. After Lisa's talk, we'll have time for questions from you, and you can ask your questions at any time during the program by typing them in the Q&A box that's at the bottom of your screen. And finally, after the program, we're interested in hearing from you. I'll be posting a link to a program survey in the chat toward the end of the event and would appreciate it if you took a minute afterwards to fill it out. So many of you have already had a chance to read The Vanishing Half, and so I'd love to hear if you want to pop a note in the chat to let us know if you read The Vanishing Half or if you're planning on reading it. But for those who haven't read it yet, we still have copies available at library locations throughout the city and, of course, at our partner bookstore, Elliott Bay Book Company. And now I'm just delighted to welcome our speaker. We were looking for this year's artistic commission for Seattle Reads, and our partners over at Wanawari just were raving about Lisa's work. And I had the pleasure of seeing some of her work in an exhibition at Wanawari, I think over the summer it was. And yeah, that was right. And just loved her work so much. And so we were thrilled when she agreed to do this commission for this year's Seattle Reads program. Lisa is a collage and book artist who works primarily in acrylics, paper, and found objects. She often uses family photos and other vintage images in her work to explore questions of identity, trust, and imperfect memories, which I think is a perfect fit for this year's selection, The Vanishing Half. Lisa aims to nudge viewers into recognizing our shared stories, especially those usually experienced in isolation. You can see work from Myers Bulmash in the City of Seattle's Portable Works art collection, which also includes art by Barbara Earl Thomas and Dale Chihuly. And Lisa also exhibits her work throughout the Puget Sound region. And on the East Coast, she's represented by Morton Fine Art Gallery in Washington, D.C. So please pop in the chat, give some applause to Lisa Myers Bulmash. Thank you so much for being here, Lisa.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I still have to laugh a little bit when you say that you were crossing your fingers that I would say yes to this commission, because I really feel like this is something that I have been preparing my entire life for.
I love it. I love it.
I was a bookworm as a kid. My brother used to say that I would read the print off the page. And so when this came along, I actually had some materials already in mind and in my studio, and I had an idea, but it wasn't fully fleshed out until we did a little talking and until I read the book. So let me just tell you a little bit about some of the ideas that I was interested in. Some of the things I really noticed were some striking ideas. The obvious one of vanishing, of course. And that led me to think about vanishing creams, about whiter generations, about hiding in plain sight in certain roles, motherhood, orphanhood, as Stella called it, being a reader, for example, and also as a maid, and for the character of Reese, him feeling like he was wearing a Therese costume. The second piece that I thought was really striking was the fact that everybody treated appearance like reality. It didn't matter whether it was about faking whiteness or considering lying the same thing as acting. Everybody all came together without even realizing it to support the idea that what they saw was what they get. The third inspiration for the piece that I did is the idea of whiteness as luck, especially good luck. Kennedy, the character of Kennedy, notices that her privilege springs from the luck and the gift she was given of whiteness. And of course, all the fair-skinned African Americans who have encounters with white people are risking exposure as Black people. So let me take a look here and show you what I have created. I'm going to share my screen in just a moment. And here we go. So this is the piece that I have created. I call it See, Hear, Speak. And the reference is pretty obvious, I think. It's to the see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil monkeys. And I thought their message of deliberate ignorance and trying to deny reality had a lot of resonance for this particular book. So let's take a look at the three pieces in this triptych. And then, but before we do that, I would like to connect this to some of what's going on in pop culture right now. The book, the novella, Passing by Nella Larson is going to be on HBO, if I remember correctly, on November 12th. And it deals obviously with the issue of passing. So does the other novella in this particular edition called Quicksand. Just coincidentally, I read it in college, so I already had a very good idea of what was going to happen. This is the theatrical poster for Passing. It stars Tessa Thompson and Ruth Negga. And here's another image from one of the movie stills. They deliberately decided to shoot it in black and white, so you get literally immersed in the idea of Blackness and whiteness from the very start. So when I decided on my materials, what I did was I decided to use a few things like these. These are what is called insulators. You may have seen these. They're called knob and tube insulators. And that is what people used to use to protect the house from the electrical wiring. Here's a picture of what it looks like in situ. So you see the knobs and the tubes sticking out right there at the edges. That way the house doesn't burn down. And this piece, I started with the insulators and decided to couple them with an antique camera, the kind that folds like an accordion. I wanted to deliberately block the lens standard with one of the insulators because I am using the insulators as a metaphor for being insulated from reality, and more specifically, being insulated by whiteness from reality. You can see that I've attached them, I've strung them together with black wire and in some cases black cord as well. And that is a deliberate choice. I decided to use the black wire inside the white insulators to underline the idea of someone's true identity being one thing and the identity that they show the rest of the world another thing. And in the background of the antique camera and the insulators, I decided to use lots of images of old skin whitener or skin brightener products. Today we know them as skin bleaching products. Some of these products are still in use today. This one right here refers to Dr. Fred Palmer's skin whitener. I don't think they make the skin whitener anymore, or if they have definitely rebranded it. And I believe that they've dropped the whole Dr. Fred idea, and it's just known as Palmer's. It makes a lot of different skincare products that you may be familiar with. So in the background, I decided to use several images from a couple of ebony magazines from the 1960s and the early 70s. So this one in particular, I decided to, oh, excuse me. This one comes from, I believe, the 1964 in October edition. And I also combined those ads for skin bleaching creams and skin whiteners with images that suggested motherhood and white femininity. You'll see that I've sort of blurred out this image of a woman whose face is surrounded by an oval frame. But if you get a little closer, you'll see that the picture is captioned "Perfect Womanhood," as if this was the only way to be a woman. I also used some pages that referred to skin complexion. You see right here that what I've left open is how sunlight affects the complexion. And it may not be clear to you why I used this sunset image, but I decided to use it because I realized that the concept of sundown towns is very pertinent to the Vanishing Half, because sundown towns were all white or nearly all white towns that had a curfew for anybody of color in their town. If you weren't out by sundown, you might get killed. So I decided to add that as another layer of urgency. And because this is the piece I call C, I decided to use Mona Lisa's eyes in a corner right above another one of the skin bleaching ads. The language is interesting in these things. You see lighter, you see clearer. Sometimes they do actually say skin whitener, like the previous ad I showed you, but for the most part, they are very careful to suggest that this is an enhancement of your skin rather than a radical destruction and rebuilding of the melanin in your skin. So let me show you the here piece. I will share my screen again in just a moment. And the here piece actually was inspired by a kind of earpiece. I really like antiques and old stuff, things that look like they have a background and a history, possibly a story to tell. And so that is why I decided to use the insulators as well as one of those old-fashioned ear trumpets. This kind of model is also called a conversation tube. And I decided to plug the receiving end, well, the receiving end of the person's voice, I decided to plug with the insulators and have them spiral up and through the frame of this part of the triptych. There are other references to whiteness and to heredity that are embedded into the collage portion of this assemblage sculpture triptych. So you may be able to see that there's some text up near the top. Originally, it said heredity and how it may be overcome. And I thought that was an interesting way to think of passing as overcoming Blackness. It's an idea that may not be specifically stated that way, but for Stella, and to a certain extent Desiree, it seems to them that if they can just get over this one barrier, then their lives will be so much better. And you can see in this picture that I've also included some of the skin bleach. This one is called Black and White Ointment, and it promises to do all sorts of wonderful things for your skin, primarily make it paler. I wanted to return back to the idea of inheritance and genetics by using an ad that was titled, "Nature Can't Do It Alone." And right under that, excuse me, right under that, a dead stock label or an unused label for wonderful vanishing cream. And just to the left, I believe, of that image is another reference to this sensory experience of hearing. And I decided to use a keyhole because I wasn't really excited with the idea of using an ear to talk about overhearing and eavesdropping and plugging your ears against reality, but I did like the idea of having a keyhole and the idea of somebody pressing their ear to the keyhole. And so you saw the insulators, like so, as I said, curving over into a sort of fountain and coming through the frame. Like the other piece of this triptych, the first part of this triptych, there is the dead stock label for the vanishing cream and a reference to sound. And now I can show you the third part, which is titled Speak, not surprisingly. And this one gave me a little bit of trouble because I was thinking specifically about antique ways to speak. I was thinking microphones, but that didn't really work for me. And then I started thinking about other bits of technology, old technology, and then I realized it's pretty easy to actually to add some old-fashioned technology to this if you just use a bullhorn. So that's what I used. I found one on one of the buy and sell sites and had it shipped to me. And I positioned it so that the bullhorn looks like it is amplifying the voice of the woman, the three sides of that woman's voice, amplifying it, and at the other end, the message that she is sharing is coming out very differently than she intended it. So the woman's face actually comes from a toothpaste ad from one of the Ebony magazine that I combed through to get some of these ads. I mainly chose it because of her expression, because she looks like she's having a very frank conversation about a particular kind of toothpaste. But once I blocked that out, I was also able to collage in more elements that referenced motherhood and children. So you can see in the background, it's mostly covered, but I want you to be able to see a little bit of the Madonna and child image that I included. There are also some papers here that use the French word bébé, which is a bit of a callback to the French and Spanish heritage of people who were born and raised in Louisiana at that time. And I found this part that says rhetoric versus reality in the Ebony magazine, and I was surprised to find out that the particular article it was headlining was a speech by Angela Davis, who of course is very well known for using her voice. Some of the other things that I added to the collage of the speak portion of this piece were the Ebony ads again, and the images that reference motherhood. You'll see that this text says mother, the most sacred word in the English language. At the same time, it's right above two ads that are trying to get you to buy into the need for vocal coaching and accent removal. The implication is that Black English, Southern English, any kind of English that isn't standard English needs to be fixed the same way that skin complexion needs to be fixed in The Vanishing Half. Like I said, some of these ads will actually say lightener, and mostly they try to be euphemistic about it. You'll see that some of the text on the ad says lightens tan and high brown skins. That is sort of code because most white people at that time, most non-Black people at that time would not have understood the reference to high brown skin complexions. There's another thing that I noticed, the images that they use to advertise how wonderfully this product works are of African-American women, but just barely. The women's skin is colored more like they're Caucasian. Really, the only hint you get is from the text and from the nose that is slightly wider than you might see on a white woman. I decided to line these up and run them down the center of the bullhorn. There were several dead stock labels that I had to choose from, but I decided to go with ones like Skin Secret Cream. And this is what is coming out of the bottom of the bullhorn. There are the insulators again, and you can't see them, but there are black wires inside the insulators holding them into place. I wanted to use the insulators as my version of the little lines that come out of somebody's mouth when they're shouting in a cartoon. And in order to cover up the piece that holds them into position, that holds them in place, I decided to use textured and patterned paper that kind of looks like a manhole cover to me. Right, and you'll see that there's another reference here to Louisiana and to speech. I was able to find an image of lips or mouth and place that right next to one of the vocal coaching ads. Is your English holding you back? And if you don't mind, I'm going to share a couple of the projects that I was working on at the same time as the Seattle Public Library Commission. These projects are ongoing. So if you're in the area for these, you can see all of these projects. Currently, I have work at the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art at WSU Pullman. My work is over here on this side of the wall. And it is something that I created as part of the Black Lives Matter Artist Grant program that was launched last year. I'm one of 24 artists who benefited from this fund to create and display new works of art and older works of art that speak to the Black experience. Okay. Apparently that was video. Let's not do that. I am very honored to have my work in the same place as Allison Sarr. This is Allison Sarr here with me in front of my piece, in front of my series that I call The Manticore and the Mermaid. And Allison Sarr is a very well-known printer and sculptor. She uses a lot of found objects and repurposes a lot of heavy industrial things to make her work. You can see behind her when she was speaking about a month ago about the print collection that's currently on display at the Schnitzer Museum. I am going to have some work in a couple of books. One of them is Collage Care, and it is edited by Lori Canier of the Canier Art Collection. The Canier Art Collection has decided to collect only collage, and for the time being, for the foreseeable future, they have decided to collect only collage made by African Americans and people of African descent. This collage enterprise also includes a sort of arts incubator where Black collagists get a chance to show their work, to participate in workshop programs and conferences where we talk about collage and assemblage, which essentially is a 3D kind of collage. And this is a piece that will be available at the J. Reinhardt Gallery in December. I am part of a group show there where all the pieces are on an 8x8 square, and basically you just get to pick the one you want, take it off the wall, pay the lady, and go home with a new piece of art. And that's it. Thank you very much for watching and for taking a look at what I've been up to, and thank you very much for being the people who chose a book that just fit right into my art practice, like hand in glove. Stasha?
Well, I'm so thrilled that it worked out, and thank you so much for sharing the piece. This is our our unveiling, basically. You know,
It
I haven't
is.
even I got a little sneak peek because Lisa sent me the pictures ahead of time, but you know, this is like to see it all together and hear the process. It's amazing. So, folks that want to ask questions, you can pop them in the Q&A box now, and we have a question from Valencia.
Uh-huh.
Where/how do you source your materials for the antiques, old ads, and labels in your work?
Most of the time I go trolling on the internet. I got these ones in particular from eBay, and let's see, I think you can see some of their provenance. These would have fit around a small vial, such as these ones, and they came in all different colors, and different graphic design, but the idea was pretty much the same. So that collection I got from eBay. I just happened to be lucky to find somebody who was selling skin whitener old labels. By the way, if you search for skin bleach on eBay, you will get some very interesting results. So I would suggest you stay away from that term.
Okay, that's a lesson learned, right? You learned that for everybody. Thank you for sharing. Um, and you called those dead stock labels, is that right? Or
Right, right. In Europe, they have a similar term, but all it means is that it's stock that was produced for a particular purpose, whether it's it's a collection of dolls or little face cream labels that were made and then never used. So it may be that the company went out of business and they just had all this inventory, or it may be that they stopped using the product because they had something else and they just didn't use everything up.
okay, thanks. Yeah, I was wondering when you said that. So I would love to know a little bit more about sort of the artistic process of taking these ideas. um, you had this rich sort of trove of ideas to work with, and then how did you come to create the thing that you created? I mean, you gave us a lot of detail about sort of what the things represent, but like the physical processes of how
Right.
you create things. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. So you remember I was mentioning the insulators.
Hmm.
I found those at an antique shop in South Snohomish County, and I thought they were interesting. I had no idea what these were either when I first saw them. So I asked about it, and the dealer said, "Oh yes, this is what they're for. They used to fit in like this." And I asked, "Well, what do you use them for?" And the person said, "Well, I don't know, wind chimes or something."
Mm.
And you could, but they're really loud. So
Hmm. Are they?
I
They're ceramic, right?
yes,
Yeah.
actually they're porcelain. Yeah,
Oh,
they're
okay.
generally porcelain. And so I had started collecting those because I knew that if I collected enough of them, I could make something. And then when you came along and said, we're reading this book called The Vanishing Half, I thought, insulation, whiteness, that is awesome. Yes, yes, please.
Yeah.
And so it grew from there.
Okay. And then the physical sort of processes I saw, so you've got your collage happening, and then I saw it looked almost like some of it had like something that looked like it was almost burned and then, bubbled and like, do you know what I mean? Like some had
Right,
that and it had like what the collage and art was weathered and such. And so
right.
how does that happen?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of anything that looks weathered, that looks like it has history. And I created those actually with some products, some acrylic products. So let me see if I can't pull up an image that might refer, that might,
Yeah, I put you on the spot. I didn't warn you I was going to ask that.
oh,
But
no problem.
seeing your photographs, the close-ups, it made me
Right.
wonder.
Okay, so let's see. I believe a good one would be here. Okay. Yes. Okay. So I'll share my screen. Okay. So you were talking about the
Yes.
crackle?
Yes,
Yes. Yes.
exactly. Crackle. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So apparently it's actually called Kraken Mirror, and it refers to the fine lines and crackles that are all over very aged objects. You've probably seen a lot of that in Renaissance paintings, where when they
Mm.
zoom in really close to a face, they still have all these lines and cracks all over the face. It's a natural process. But I found a product, a two-part product that allowed me to create those cracks, and then I rubbed a darker color into those cracks.
Oh, I love that. Okay. That's so cool.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So, can you talk a little bit about your background and how you came to this work? Because you just are so amazing at it. And
Thank you.
it's just, yeah. Tell us a
Yeah.
little bit more about how you came to do what you're doing now.
Well, I really did not expect to become a visual artist. I started out as a reader and then as a writer, and I still do a lot of writing for one reason or another. That also makes it a little easier for me, but not that much easier to fill out grant applications for
Oh, yeah.
funding. So I started out as a writer, so I was creating art, but it was literary art, or at least news of the moment. I used to be in the news biz. And so I learned how to write there. And around 2000, I started getting interested in some art stamps. I had never seen them before. I had only seen like the little stamps like teachers use on grading papers, say, good job, and check this and see me later and all that stuff. So I was really impressed by the detail of some of the reproductions. There were like Leonardo da Vinci reproductions of his hand sketches and things like that. And that sort of became my gateway drug. And then I went to some art and craft retreats, in particular one called Art Fest, which used to be held up at Fort Worden. And it gathered together all sorts of artsy and craftsy people for a 3 to 4 day weekend. And I started showing my work around 2010. And that was actually kind of tough because I wasn't sure if I wanted to make the work and just keep it for myself or share
Hmm.
it publicly.
Hmm. Hmm.
But then I decided, well, part of art is as a method of communication. So if I am making art and then I never show it to anybody, then who am I communicating with, really? I mean, it's one thing to have a diary or a journal where you communicate to yourself, and that is very valid. As a matter of fact, I have an art journal where I combine words and images. But if I make something that is a little less personal, a little more, this is what I was thinking at the time, I really feel like I have somewhat of an obligation to share it because I'm trying to communicate something.
I love that. Do you have advice for folks that are, that I think what you just hit on, this idea of like making art for the joy of that, of creating and whatever, versus then trying to make a career out of that? Do you have advice for people about that? I think
Mhm.
talking about the communication piece is really a beautiful way to look at that. But it must be tricky, right?
It is. It's it's kind of a huge subject because you start out with, okay, am I going to show my work to other people or not? Yes, I'm. And then the diagram goes to, where am I
Right.
going to show these people, and who am I going to show it to, and what am I going to do? Am I going to just show them my work, or am I going to try and make money off of my work?
Hmm.
So I was very fortunate in that Artist Trust had an EDGE program,
Oh,
or
yeah, yeah.
they had a professional development program which talked about the ins and outs of exhibiting your work, selling your work, being in a gallery and having them sell your work, things like that. And what I heard from a few of the people who were in my cohort was that that's the kind of nuts and bolts, everyday information that they did not get in their Masters of Fine Arts program.
Right.
So
Right.
so I was thinking, dodged a bullet, saved how many thousands of dollars by not going to art school.
That practical information is so helpful and often overlooked, right?
Right, and I believe that Artist Trust is once again offering the EDGE program, but I believe they are now partnering with Gage, the Gage Academy of Art,
Oh,
to
okay.
actually put that program together.
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting. Well, do you have, we're gonna wrap up unless folks have additional questions. I have a nice comment that I'll share with you in just a minute from the chat. But do you have any words of advice for people that are interested in making art, whether that's for work or for play? Do you?
I think Kurt Vonnegut had a really good quote about that, where he was talking about the value of making anything. He said, you will end up with something really valuable. You will have created something with your own hands. And I think that is really something crucial in our lives, where we're so often online, like now, or we're communicating digitally, we're sending people pictures, but we're not actually making something that appears in the real world unless you print it out on a piece of paper.
Right.
And there are also lots of studies that show that when you are making something, when you're doing something with your hands and connecting your brain to your hands in that work, that it gives your brain a bit of a chance to sort of chill out and let things flow, which is why sometimes you will come up with an idea while you're washing the windows, for example, because because the simple act gives you a chance to sort of stretch and relax mentally, and then the ideas and the problem solving that usually goes on in art, that's when that starts to flow.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. I think we have enough time. If you don't mind sharing some of the pieces behind you,
Oh, sure.
we have a little bit of extra time, but I'll have you stop sharing your screen so we can see them closer.
Alrighty then.
Yeah, because we're still
share.
getting this close up. Perfect.
Okay, so this piece.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this was one of the pieces that was in the summer exhibit at Wanawari. My solo show was called Holding Patterns. And this is a piece that I created earlier into the pandemic. I was thinking about a particular idea of withdrawing from the world, because it seemed like there were a lot of forces and a lot of people essentially targeting people with my life. I'm African American, I'm female, I'm college educated, I am a creative person. I do all these things that really upset some people for some reason. And my family is pretty much one that would upset some of those people as well. So I happened to come across a blog article by Lovey Ajayi Jones. Her blog is called Awesomely Lovey. And she was talking about the idea of Blacksit instead of Brexit, Blacksit, the idea of all the Black people in America just leaving the planet, leaving Earth, leaving the planet. We're done with your stuff, with your mess, we're done. And so I started thinking, well, what would it look like to actually have a Blacksit? What if we went to totally different worlds? And so that's why I decided to use some images that I have repurposed from a colonial archive. These are actually people who are portrayed. This is an illustration that portrays a pair of enslaved people, but I liked it because they're talking together and they seem to be considering something important. And then pulling out a little bit, it's a little harder to see, but the transparency there shows a Zeppelin. Yeah, or what do they call them? Dirigibles. That's right.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, well, maybe I could make something that suggested that these people were really trying to decide whether or not they wanted to buy that ticket and get on the plane. Get on the dirigible.
Yeah.
And this one is a continuation of that theme. You'll see that the women in that corner are having a conversation. This comes from the same colonial archive that I found the other pair of people. And for this one, I decided to add people lined up in front of tents. That image comes from the Library of Congress, and it's from the Great Mississippi Flood of, I want to say 1919 or 1909. It's very early in the century. And like a lot of climate crises and disasters, Black people were the ones who suffered the worst, because their homes and their work and their livelihoods were in floodplains and otherwise vulnerable places. And when the Red Cross picked them up, they were actually forced to stay in these Red Cross refugee camps, or I guess that's what you might call it. They were not allowed to leave except at certain periods of the day. Some of them weren't allowed to leave at all. And when Mississippi started rebuilding, this was an enormous flood. I should point this out. This was all up and down the Mississippi. So that is from the south to the very north of the country. So there were a lot of people who suffered besides the people in Mississippi. But getting back to them in particular, when the government started handing out disaster relief funding, they didn't get any of it at all. It wasn't slow. It wasn't. it wasn't a situation where you had to jump through a bunch of bureaucratic hoops. They just didn't get anything.
Yeah.
And so I decided to use that image of the people lined up in front of the refugee tents, and then again another dirigible. And I like to think of the women as having sort of a last minute conversation about, well, you know, they're gonna leave in like an hour. Are we gonna go? Are we gonna go? Are we gonna go?
Well, I love that you have sort of an alternate history but Afrofuturist kind of thing going on. That's amazing. It's like,
yeah, one of the things I've noticed about Afrofuturism is that there's a lot of hope in it. There's a lot of, we will survive this and we will thrive. And that's one of the things that draws me to some other artists who specialize in that particular subgenre of art.
oh, that's awesome. That's great. Well, thanks for sharing those with us. And one of the things that I noticed when I saw them at Wanawari was that the base that you've carved into are books, and so you get this very cool 3D sort of like you're almost like inside a tree house. The first chatterbox, you're almost, it's like you're in a tree house or something, the way it looks like bark or something. And
Right.
you know, I was,
again, that's me not being able to leave anything alone and just let it be. You know, I have to age it or do something to it. And so the levels that you see are hand-torn pages that I have accentuated with Van Dyke brown acrylic paint. That's what it is.
oh yeah, it looks so cool. Yeah, so hopefully folks will be able to see those up close sometime soon-ish. Are those actually on your website? Maybe they could go to your website and.
Yes, they are. Yes,
okay,
they are.
I'm gonna pop that. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I have 3 sections of work on my website. One is assemblage sculpture, one is collage, and one is altered books. If you want to see these, you would go to the altered books section.
Cool. I'm going to pop the link in the chat so folks can know where to go. Well, thank you so much. This has been such a joy to hear about your work and learn about your process. And thank you so much for being available for the library, you know, in this way. It was just like the perfect thing. And we have a lovely comment that I will read from Karen S. Karen says, Lisa's work and the ways in which she does such extensive research to create multi-layered collage pieces is perfect for this commission, and these pieces are amazing in how it converses both literally and figuratively with this book. And I could not agree more. And Karen, I'm going to steal that because that was perfectly said.
So, yeah, I'll just put it as a banner on my website.
Right,
you know,
right. Just get a
come on,
t-shirt.
Karen said this. I didn't say this. Karen said this.
Yeah,
but thank you very much. And it has been a tremendous honor, because it's the Central Library that reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you make something for us?" And I said, "Sure, I'll see what I can do."
Yeah.
I'll see what I can do.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much. And so I wanted to let folks know, and you and I haven't even had a chance to talk about this really in depth, but Lisa's artwork is going to be on display at one of our library locations. And I just got word today that we think it will fit at the Douglas Truth
Oh,
Library in the
great, great.
case there. So Lisa and I are going to work out the installation dates, which will be happening very soon, but we will let you all know once it's installed so you can go and look at it in person, because that I think will be the real, joyous thing, to be able to see your art in that way.
Thank you.
Um,
And yes, and as soon as we figure that out, I will spread the news far and wide on my social media.
yeah.
So find somebody who's involved in this, and you'll find out.
Yeah, we'll definitely let everybody know. I'm super excited. So, well, thank you so much. I want to let folks know that I just am popping a link to a survey here, so you can tell us what you think. You can also let us know if there's other programs that you want to see at the library. So take a minute after the program to click that link and share what you think. We're so grateful to the sponsors for the Seattle Reads program: the Wallace Foundation, Riverhead Books, the Seattle Public Library Foundation, and the Seattle Times, and of course, um, our community partners for Seattle Reads: the African American Writers Alliance, Langston, Northwest African American Museum, and Wanawari. And I do want to give a special shout out to Elishaba and Solma at Wanawari, because they recommended your work super highly, and I was just so grateful for their thoughts on that. And so shout out to them and the work that they're doing there. And of course, we are so grateful to everybody that joined us tonight. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see
Thank
you
you.
all very soon.
All right. Thank you very
Yeah.
much. You
Okay.
guys
Good
have a
night.
good evening.
Good night.